is Kristen, and I'm the Director of Operations here at GMI. I'd like to welcome you to our roundtable on how is AI affecting the job market. We'll spend a little bit of time discussing this topic. As a reminder, this call will be recorded and made available on our YouTube channel. We're joined today by repeat GMI mentors, Tyler and Serah, who will introduce themselves, share a bit about their career journey. Then we'll move into the questions that were submitted from our GMI mentees for this topic. If throughout the meeting you have any additional questions, please feel free to type them in and we can address them at the end. Serah, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure, I'd love to. Hi, everybody. I'm Serah Delaini. I'm a product marketing manager at Microsoft. And in my career, I've pretty much had three interests. It's been how people communicate, how business works, and computers, technical things. It's been interesting. So I've gone from having a regular job most of my life to having my side business to starting my own marketing agency. And then I even worked for a VR startup for a few years that I was the first marketing and communications employee with 25 engineers. That was a lot of fun. And then I returned to Microsoft in 2022, where I work on Windows marketing, Windows commercial. So my job is to help people understand the value of why they should pay for a higher level of Windows than normally just comes out of the box. That's what I do.
Tyler?
Great. Thanks, Serah. My name is Tyler McLaughlin. I'm a data and AI, or previously data and AI specialist. Microsoft is frequently changing names and titles, so I'm now a cloud and AI specialist. So just cover a little bit more infrastructure now. I've been on Microsoft for almost 3 years. So when Serah returned, that's when I started as well, 2022. And I am in New Hampshire, and I believe I'm on my 6th mentorship, and I have a great experience with GMI, and I look forward to doing many more. Nice to meet you all.
Thank you both. We'll move into the questions, and the first question is about the AI job application screening. The students were asking, what does this mean for applicants, and what can you do to adapt to this new AI screening? Serah?
Yeah, the way that I think about it is when a job is posted and you are applying through, how should I put it, where you don't know them yet, and you're just giving them your resume and it's going over the transom is an old term where people used to throw their manuscripts over the top of the publisher's doors and just leave them there. And a lot of times if you just give them your resume, you're just dropping it off by itself. And a lot of those jobs that are posted aren't really the best. So number one that has been true for a while is continue with your networking. You can make your own job a lot of times by talking to people about your strengths. And what else did I want to say? Yeah, interpersonal connections are actually sometimes easier. Once you make those connections with someone, then the AI screening isn't quite as important, but it does take a little more effort interpersonally to get out there with people and maintain those connections, have those coffees with people. And then there's always entrepreneurship, which I'm sure we'll get into at some point during this call. I would say that make sure that the organization that you want to work for is using AI responsibly and not as sort of a shield for the unwanted applicants, right? Are they really using it to filter for strengths and skills? That's a big question.
Tyler?
Yeah, I think I'm pretty spot on with Serah. I guess when I first read this question, I wanted to communicate that I think this idea that AI and ML algorithms analyze and filter our job applications, whether it's like parsing resumes or ranking candidates, etc. I think this is like been around for like longer than we expect. The advent of generative AI in the past 5-10 years has definitely exacerbated that. But I think it really has been around for a bit, and I don't have any experience myself in recruiting or talent acquisition. So I want to say that from the get-go that I'm not sure if this has been around, but I feel like it has. So I guess to elaborate a bit, I think this means that humans solely are unlikely to be like reviewing your resume and application. There might be some smaller companies out there that may not be adopters of this kind of status quo, but for the most part, it is likely that this process is being spearheaded by AI with a human in the loop component. So you'll hear that often, like human in the loop, whether that's like a human looking over, and really kind of just being the project manager to ensure that AI is on the right track. I think the good news is that with AI and its presence in the application process, that it might mitigate some biases, it ensures consistency, and it can certainly speed up the process of the application lifecycle. I guess the lesser or bad news is, you really need to ensure that you're using the right buzzwords on your application, on your resume, on your cover letter to really show or have AI kind of like tick that box and ensure that you're putting the right message together. On the last note, I would say my advice to you is just like keep the resume part of the application process like transactional. And what I mean by that is like don't waste too much energy trying to explain or justify or prove yourself on your resume itself, because you'll have time to do that and to compensate during interviews or a cover letter that are actually with a human. So yeah, keep the resume clean and simple, because at the end of the day, there is a good chance that AI or a machine might be reviewing it.
Thank you. And then Serah, you sort of started touching on this, but how can someone identify unique skills that AI cannot do? And you sort of mentioned the personal aspect and things, but
Oh my
anything else
gosh,
to add?
yes. Yes. AI business processes cannot automate themselves. They can't. We have tools that are working to automate themselves, but in general, there has to be that human analysis of what is the issue and what is the path we're going to take to solve it and interpret the results of any AI tools, AI or other tools that we use. You have to use tools to access the AI right now. So understanding those tools, building the tools, refining them, making them better, tons of work right there. It can't regulate itself. What are the guardrails? We hope that it will regulate itself, but basically someone needs to tell it a lot of what's acceptable and what's not acceptable in those responses. Certainly there's a lot of human effort that goes into training the models. A lot of it's developers, but a lot of it's unseen content moderators. It's definitely not something that can just run itself. So that's one thing I want to say, is that there's opportunity within the technological world to manage that and to vet the responses that come out of it. We'll probably get into this in a little bit, but you can't just take what it says for granted, that it's 100% accurate. So there needs to be checking. Similar to a calculator, today we take calculators for granted that they're 100% accurate, but there was a time, or maybe if you're using a complex equation, you need to make sure that you understand the parameters of what that response really could be. And that's AI too on a different scale. One more thing, right? My question for you would be, what do you want to bring into the world and what skills or tools will make that happen? More than what skills will AI make obsolete? What is it that you do envision? Because AI can be a tool for you along that journey more than a thing that will prevent you from doing it.
And Tyler, how can someone identify unique skills that AI cannot do in your realm?
Sure. I would say, so AI can be quite creative when prompted, right? There are tools like Dolly, that can create images, and we have agentic AI and all this VR stuff that can create videos and be quite realistic. But really, humans don't need to be prompted, right? We don't need to be prompted. So I would say that we are naturally different and unique when it comes to our creativity compared to AI. So like we have our own DNA, we're not manufactured, right? A human can recognize that from the get-go. So I would say humans are a bit less transactional and more empathetic and authentic. And I would think about how important that is in nearly every single industry, right? It doesn't have to be specifically HR or customer service. But nearly in every single industry, there are ways that humans can compensate and show our creativity in ways that AI cannot replicate, or if it does replicate, it's a little bit less authentic. So I would say, be yourself, be creative, be unique. If you don't think you're creative, like you definitely are. It all comes down to like self-awareness and ultimately knowing yourself.
The next question is, do you think it is worth taking courses to have an expertise in AI? So as AI is growing, I think one of the concerns is a lot of students don't know that much. So would you recommend taking courses, or if you have taken courses, what were they? Tyler, would you like to go first?
Sure. Yeah. So I mean, I think it's definitely worthwhile to take courses if you have the time, or if if you're simply curious. I wouldn't go as far as to say that it's like worth it or like it's required, and you definitely should. Especially if we're speaking in terms of like a financial ROI. AI really is infused in everything that we do. So I think it's important to be an adept user, but that doesn't require you to become certified or spend tons of money on courses. So I guess my advice to you, particularly students, would be to just get lost, get lost using these AI services with the goal of understanding how it can make you more impactful. Whether that's being a more impactful student, more impactful worker, maybe for an internship, more impactful, analyst, researcher. Personally, I've done like Microsoft certifications, uh, which I think in the past have been funded by Microsoft for employees. But I just try to get lost, right? I try to go to ChatGPT, Microsoft Copilot, and just learn from there. And I think you all can certainly do that, and you'll find that it helps a lot.
Serah?
Similar, yes, I definitely advocate for education. However, I would consider accessing first the open source material that's available. There are, in any developing technology, user groups will arise. People want to share their knowledge. We have early adopters, people who want to help build things, and usually they do want to share with each other. So there are some AI communities out there that you can join. Hugging Face is one. GitHub, of course, has a huge ecosystem around it. Um, I would say the tips and tricks from them, similar to what Tyler said, get in there and experiment. You don't have to pay for education in this field if you don't want to, because it's an early phase of development. And so you are becoming the experts if you use it. You yourself could create a certification for other groups. There's nothing stopping you from that. What you do with it is most important for getting the jobs if you do want employment from other people, like a lot of fields. Have you ever used it? I would say a project portfolio is more powerful than saying that you have completed particular courses.
Mm.
Sorry. Are there any specific prompts in AI to adjust job descriptions to CVs to avoid mistakes? Have you come up with or seen any prompts? Serah?
Uh, this is a little bit similar to the question around how do you make your resume great with AI or for the AI engine? Are there specific prompts where you can adjust your job description to the CV or resume to avoid mistakes? Like there's a couple pieces to that question. The mistakes part, no, I mean, you have to check over everything AI does, like line by line. And if we had time, I would tell you a couple stories of times I've used it on the job where it caught me by surprise. You have to check everything on it and make sure. But I was going to tell you about jobscan.io, which is a tool that I know of. It's an online website that you can, and there's some like free amount that you can use the tool for free for a little bit. You put in your resume, you put in that CV or I mean, your CV and your job description or resume, as you might call it, and it will help you match it with a score of how close your information about yourself matches that job description. So jobscan.io, I'm sure there's many others. That's just one I happen to know about and have used myself.
Tyler?
That's great. Yeah, I'll actually have to look that one up.
It's awesome.
Yeah. Well, let's see. What was I going to say? So I'll leverage usually like a ChatGPT or Microsoft Copilot at times when applying for a job. And I usually encourage my mentees to do the same. So I'll ask ChatGPT something like, attached is my resume, right? I am interested in the following position, whatever that might be. And then subsequently, I pasted the job description. And I'll say like, oh, based on this description, and what you know about me, right, via my resume, please create a cover letter that displays maybe to the hiring manager why I am qualified for this position, right? And it doesn't just end there, and I don't just copy and paste it and throw it in a Word document. What I'll do is I'll copy and paste it eventually, but right now I kind of want to parse through and say like, all right, what information looks good? Maybe what's missing? Oh, it didn't really highlight this project that I worked on. I really wanted to highlight that. So I'll tweaking some words, using that kind of mindset of human in the loop element, and just kind of taking those two and creating something that really reflects who you are as a person. So I'll do that often with cover letters. I'll just make up some fake ones to show my mentees as an example. I'm sure you can do it backwards and maybe tidy up your resume as well, but your options are endless for using like ChatGPT and Microsoft Copilot for creating a better application experience.
And then along those same lines, how can you ensure that what AI is providing is accurate? I know sometimes our students, there was one situation where a student used AI to kind of create their resume, and then instead of proofing it, they just kind of submitted it and it was not their life. It had experiences that they did not have. So then when it came time for the interview, they couldn't really back anything up. But so other than like you proofing it, is there anything else that you can do to ensure that what you are getting from AI is actually accurate? Serah?
On a resume, I would say no. On a resume, you should look at every word on that document because that's representing you, and you don't want to be accused of, saying something that isn't accurate. But for other things, sources, the tool that I use internally at work gives the source documents at the bottom. And so if I see something in the response that I don't already know, for whatever reason, it's already calibrated in my mind, then I look at that source document. Sometimes you can tell, like Copilot is meant for, it looks at your internal work data. And so it uses your own documents. And sometimes it will make responses that are about those documents rather than the topic. And you can kind of tell. If I have any questions, though, I read those source documents. I think we might have time. I'll just briefly say, one time I used AI to write a video script not too long ago, last year. And the video script was great. It came out nice and short, which is a super use for this tool. And I had the person go into the studio and record their part. I wasn't giving the video, I had a narrator. It comes back and I'm asking the video editor to add links for different things, links and URLs within the video. And there was this mention of customers who'd used our product. There were 2 customers mentioned, and I went to go look up their customer evidence or case study, as we call it at Microsoft. And usually those are public links on the public website. So I'm looking for these customer names. I don't see them. I mean, this video is done, and I don't see these customers. They were prospects. Somehow the AI had looked around internally at our corporate data and said, yeah, these people thought about being customers of this product. They have maybe a different product, but they don't have this one. So I'll make it as short as possible. I was so worried. I found 2 different customers that kind of had similar stories, and the narrator would only have to change a few words. So I call the editors and I say, can we have them narrate these couple more words? Can you slice it in? And they said, well, actually, Serah, it's easier if we have AI do it. There's a correcting tool. If they will just sign a release, we can use AI to make their voice say those words. And that's what happened. So AI made the problem, and AI fixed the problem. The person signed the release, and a couple weeks later, back comes this video with the new customer names, the real ones, in there. And I was so thankful because otherwise, but that's what really taught me, check every line. Thanks for
Tyler?
listening.
No, yeah, I think no, that's a great point, Sarah. I think something actually just came up today where I'm onboarding for a new role. I mentioned that, my role is changing for this fiscal year, and I wanted to research more like infrastructure related services. I think I had used one of our Microsoft internal AI tools in the past to say, hey, give me a summary of blank. And I was talking to my manager today, our first one-on-one, and I had a clarification question for him, and basically saying, this these storage services, right? There's blob storage, there's Azure file storage, and there's Azure disk storage, right? And he's like, "What? Azure disk storage? Like that's not a thing, basically." AI had made it up, and it's what's supposed to be managed disk, which is a part of blob storage. But this is why we got to continue to ask questions, and I'll say this certainly could have been my part. I'm not blaming AI for this, but your input is only good as your output. It's cliche, but you'll hear that your input is only as good as your output. So even like when you're writing a prompt and you're asking AI this question, like be specific, be specific. Don't be afraid to provide too much information, because the more you provide it, the more accurate the output or your response is going to be. Of course, I'll add, like, you always want to check, supported resources, links, documentation. I think Sarah had mentioned that our internal Microsoft tool provides that. Something like ChatGPT, for example, does not provide that by default. So if you get an answer from ChatGPT, you won't usually find any links, maybe on the back end, but the graphical user interface, like, you don't see links. But I tested it out earlier today, and you can ask ChatGPT, like, hey, like, I don't see any links right here. You know, can you provide links? Like, what are these links? I'm interested in checking them out online. So you can be, very, I don't know, just like use natural language, right? Just be very simple and ask ChatGPT to provide links next time, so you can cross-check, cross-reference your resource, and to ensure you that you have the right information ultimately. So
The next question is more so along the pros and cons, which we've sort of gone through, but are there any cons that you've seen or pros that are important to kind of point out to our students who are in this job process, or just using AI in general? Sarah?
Yes. I would say commercial motivation for developing and rolling out technology is one thing. And, Tyler's also alluded to the fact that we are creative. We can pursue things that we want to come true. Even if we don't succeed, it's still a way to go. And open source AI is really exciting. I would like to find more commercial uses for AI that help humanity. And I could just kind of stop right there. Like, what are some of the reasons why you would use it that would be helpful and also have some sort of economic benefit at whatever scale is important to the person who's spending their time on it. I would say to join responsible AI groups to make AI safer and more inclusive. Have more people be able to use it. What we don't want is for technologies to be concentrated in just a few hands, especially something like this. So all new technology waves, you'll see this sort of diffusion. And I encourage you to jump in there and take advantage of it, because you can help make it less biased. You can help make it more positive for humanity by bringing the humanity into it with your own desires and drive. Training the models, I just wanted to mention, takes a lot of human effort and energy usage. So I personally am involved in sustainability with Windows, and we have cloud services, some different ways of getting a Windows operating system. Tyler, welcome to the fold. You're going to be learning more about the infrastructure, I'm sure. I'm so excited for that. AI has to have data, and so I personally have studied on privacy regulations and standards for ethical and appropriate data handling. Yes, I mean, that's the name of the game. just because human activity has data associated with it, is there a commercial use? Yes or no? Is that important? Is there other sorts of data like weather data? Is there a commercial use for it? Should it be provided? There's a lot of important ethical questions that I invite you all to join us in exploring.
Tyler, any pros, cons that you've seen or anything along those lines?
Sure. Yeah. So there's definitely going to be a long list of pros and cons, especially depending on who you ask and your certain experience with AI. I guess I'll say, speaking to cons first, I'm going to say this in a pretty broad way, but many new things, technologies have been met with skepticism upon like the release. So you think about the internet, you think about mobile phones, you think about PCs, TVs, even cars, right? Automobiles in the early 1900s. These are met with skepticism, and it's a very iterative process, and it continues to evolve. So I would say like AI is similar, right? Generative AI has been more ubiquitous in the past 5 years, but AI itself has been around. The term was actually coined in New Hampshire. I'm from New Hampshire, so it's a proud moment, in 1956. So this concept has been around for a while. But anyways, I'll get to the pros and cons. So I would say cons could be the rapid pace of innovation, because it makes it difficult for people to adapt and catch up, right? So you see models coming out all the time, whether it's OpenAI or Anthropic or Meta launching them. It can be really hard to keep up with, and that's can be frustrating and overwhelming. And you might just say, hey, screw this. I don't even want to learn about it, or what's the point? So I would say that could be a con, but if anything, that's a great thing, because it means that we're constantly innovating in this industry. I also had, like the internet can be abused, AI can be abused too, right? So it's you can argue that it's basically a search engine because you have an input and an output. You could use it for cheating, for copying. So I would say use it ethically. Try to be smart. Try to have a moral compass where you ensure that you're making the right decision. But there are always going to be bad actors out there. For pros, I would say the ease of access and ubiquity. Also the ease of use. So we can use artificial intelligence via natural language. Like you can be super colloquial and like just nonchalant in how you communicate it with it. I would also say the ease of intervention and training of a model can be nice. So you can manipulate different models, train them, and tailor them to your needs and create bespoke solutions. So that kind of gives you some agency to be creative with these AI models. But yeah, a litany of pros and cons nonetheless.
We received one question, which I think sort of goes along with the pros and cons of, have either of you used Gemini, and what do you have to say about it in comparison with Copilot and ChatGPT? Because you've both mentioned Copilot and ChatGPT. I think, like, to add on to that, is using one AI like the way to go, or should you always be sort of mixing around to see the different versions? But first, have either of you ever used Gemini?
I haven't personally, and maybe I should have.
I know, that's how I
But
feel too. Like, I'm sure our
yeah,
managers would have wanted us to by now, but I mean, there's a lot to keep up with.
right, yeah, exactly. So it's like I can spend all my time on ChatGPT or Microsoft Copilot, and I feel like I'm constantly falling behind just because there are new announcements and new features becoming available. But my preference, and of course, yeah, I may be a little biased, but I would say probably Microsoft Copilot, because the fact that it's more like enterprise ready and provides you with this links and it's more transparent. I think that's something that I really appreciate as a user, not just someone who works at the company and sells this solution, but like as a user itself, I want something that's going to be as accurate as possible. Yeah, that's going to be helpful, provide links, that's going to have a feedback loop where I can say, oh, this is good, this isn't good, etc. But I'd be curious to learn more about your experience in the chat if you use Gemini.
I will say I do use Copilot at work. I probably will go over and check out Gemini after this call, make sure I'm not missing out on anything, and also to see their user interface, like that's the business I'm in. But I do use Claude AI, which I believe is from Anthropic, which is that company that spun off of OpenAI to be more human focused. So I figured maybe I'll give that a try. I do like it. It's very literary, kind of. It's got wordy responses, but that's one that I'm trying and that I use when I'm not using the work one, because the work one, you have to have a license. Like you can't just use, well, okay, so this is the thing. There's Bing Copilot, but like Tyler said, it doesn't have enterprise data protection. And that's, of course, the reason we're in the commercial business. That's one of our big things to offer is that data. I'm not sure any data is safe right now, fully. And I'm sure Tyler might have some reasons why, we can make some safer. And yeah, I guess I'll kind of stop there, but I would just be careful what inputs I'm putting, what prompts I'm using with different engines, and just be super aware of who's using your query and the response to then further benefit themselves versus you.
And then one of our last questions that were previously submitted was, what industries do you think, and this is going to be hypothetical, will be most disrupted by AI? Are there any industries that you can see AI really having a larger role in, or anything along those lines? Tyler?
So I guess disrupted can be positive or negative. So negatively disrupted, I would say any industry humans fail to adapt, right? So I predominantly work with state and local government customers. And, there's this big cliche that these are some very apprehensive folks. They're security, compliance driven and focused. Maybe they're well tenured. They've been there for a while and they're looking to retire. So they prefer stability. That isn't always true. Sometimes it is. But because of that, I think sometimes those types of workers or state employees are labeled as being less likely to adapt, and to innovate, and to keep up with the times. But really, whatever industry it is, I think if you don't adapt, right, you die. There's that little phrase or analogy. I think we have to adapt, and whatever industry doesn't, it's going to be a hard time, or they're going to be heavily disrupted in a negative manner by AI.
Well put. Yeah. When I thought about this question, I was like, well, it's easier to think about what industries wouldn't be disrupted. And then I went to go check, what does disrupted mean usually in these terms? It usually means smaller companies with fewer resources can successfully challenge established companies in that industry. So in those terms, yeah, almost any industry, you can find a way to use this pretty powerful tool, both on the generative AI side and the machine learning side, to advance your interests. Like I mentioned earlier, like what is your goal? AI can probably help regardless of industry. But overall, I would say that industries that are already highly efficient will be not prone to disruption. For example, restaurants. Here where I live, restaurants don't have a big profit margin usually. And they have this delivery thing that's been happening more and more since the pandemic, that people stayed at home and ordered in. So that industry is already really tight with profit margin. And I don't think AI is going to markedly change it, but there will be incremental improvements. Like if you use a review program, a lot of times AI will have summaries on top of the reviews of themes that it's found throughout. Maybe there's 100 reviews for that restaurant, and the AI says, yeah, it's usually open, the food is fresh, whatever it is that people are saying, AI will bubble that up, and that's in use today. So that's an example of an incremental improvement versus a complete disruption. But industries that are not highly efficient, kind of along what Tyler was saying, industries that already have too much profit perhaps, or it's just not quite balanced and sustainable. Those are the industries that the smaller companies and organizations have the most opportunity to disrupt with this technology in a positive way.
We just received one more question clarification type thing. It is towards you, Tyler.
Yeah.
Earlier, when you mentioned that people should ensure to keep their resume as simple as possible, because they'll have time to further explain it during the interview. Does that mean that we are currently sure that humans no longer go through resume before shortlisting candidates?
I am not sure. As I mentioned, yeah, I haven't been in talent acquisition or a recruiter, but I can imagine for the bigger companies at least, if you think about it, some of these companies are receiving upwards of 1,000 job applications per job that's on like LinkedIn or Indeed, for example. So I'm assuming that AI is, parsing through the resume, looking for those buzzwords, maybe looking for like, oh, this person has 5 years of experience, or they actually have a bachelor's degree, or, some roles require an MBA or MSA, depending on what you're doing. And then upon approval, maybe they'll go to a second part in the application process where maybe there's a phone screening, and that's actually with a human. And subsequent, there's a meeting with the hiring manager and a meeting with the team itself. And that's when they introduce more behavioral questions like STAR method, in which you really talk about the action you took, the result itself. So it's an assumption on my end. I guess what I was trying to say, for keeping your resume and keeping that process transactional is like, don't try to create a resume that's like even, 2, 3 pages long. So like, depending on what industry you're going for and what your background is, like keep it to a page, keep it concise, keep it terse, highlight things, but like expand upon those highlights once you can talk to a human, and that's when your personality really shows, and all the colorful, I don't know, like all of your true colors show, so
And I'd
hopefully
just like to
that
add
makes
on.
sense.
Yes, it's a
Sorry, you go,
great
Sarah.
point. Great point. Let's see, accuracy, right? So one thing that AI might be used to screen for is accuracy of your dates. And to Tyler's point, the less you put on that resume or CV, the less room there is for error. But it's potential that you can imagine the things that it could do on a big scale, and one can be that it checks the dates to see if there's any big gaps on your resume, for example, that are unexplained. Or maybe it could even have other databases on you that compare with what you've said on your resume. And if AI sees some big discrepancy, out you go, right? So there could be, just keeping it shorter is less likely to run into that, but also just check those dates, make sure that everything lines up.
So those are the end of our questions. If anybody else has anything, please feel free to write one in. But before we wrap up, I was just wondering if either of you had any closing remarks on AI in affecting the job market that you would like to share with our students. Serah, would you like to go first?
Sure. I'm kind of old now, right? I've been in the working world for about 40 years, actually, because I started sort of young. I've always worked. I started in food service, and then I decided I should go back to college or go back to school and get a degree. It taught me a lot, food service, about the world and people, and being successful even in chaotic situations, right? And then I did go back to college, and I just want to say that I've seen a lot of different technologies rise. And that's why I want you to ground yourself in the humanity of it. This is supposed to serve us. And a lot of times, technology engineers want to push new things out. And people are inventing stuff all day long, but it doesn't mean that that's the thing that you are going to use as a tool to get to where you want to go, or to bring into the world what you want to bring into it. That's the core of it. Tools come and go. And yeah, these are great. They're going to be terrific, but it's not the end all be all.
Mhm.
Tyler?
Yeah, I love Sarah's point. And I have a different perspective, I guess, just because, I mean, this is my first job. I've been at Microsoft for 3 years, and before that, I was in college, like most of these students here. And I would say, um, I can't tell you how to feel, right? You know, because you have the right to feel maybe overwhelmed or excited or, you know, upset about AI or whatever it is, right? But my recommendation would be is to like what to do, right? So I would say act, show up, you know, and just be a lifelong learner. So you don't have to adopt AI heavily to be curious about it and inquisitive about it, but ultimately just like understand how it can augment your work and make you not just a more impactful employee, but just a more impactful person. Yeah. So hopefully that makes sense. Just thinking on the fly here.
No, that did. Thank you very much, both of you. I know I learned a lot, so I appreciate both of your times. Otherwise, I will say have a good evening and thank you very much for everybody attending. Have a great night.
Thanks, Kristen.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Sarah.
Thanks
See
for having
everyone.
us.